The rain came down like nails. It was 5:40 in the morning, November 18th, 1943, on the northern ridge of Bougainville Island, and Corporal John Miller's platoon hadn't moved 20 yards in 6 hours. They were pinned, not by machine guns, not by mortars, but by something far worse, something invisible. A Japanese sniper. Maybe two, maybe an entire nest of them. Every man in that muddy trench knew the rule by now. Anyone who lifted their head above the fallen log died. Anyone who tried to crawl toward the trail died. One private had tried to reach for his canteen 3 hours ago. He was still lying there, 15 feet away, face down in the mud, rain pooling in the hole where his eye used to be. No one had the courage to pull him back. This was the fourth day. 4 days of hell on a jungle ridge that didn't even have a name on the maps. 4 days of invisible death raining down from the canopy. The trail below, barely wide enough for two men to walk side by side, was supposed to be their lifeline, the only supply route to the artillery outpost 2 miles inland. Without it, the guns would go silent. Without the guns, the whole northern perimeter would collapse. But for 3 days, that trail had been a killing ground. 10 men dead. 10 sets of dog tags they couldn't retrieve. 10 letters home nobody wanted to write. All because of ghosts in the trees. Japanese snipers who fired once, maybe twice, then vanished like smoke. The men were exhausted, hollow-eyed. They'd been awake for 70 hours straight, taking turns on watch, jumping at every snapped twig, every rustle of leaves. Some had stopped eating. Some had stopped talking. The fear had settled into their bones like the cold rain that never seemed to stop. Lieutenant Hayes crouched low in the trench, water streaming off his helmet, and glanced at the man beside him. The one the others had started calling Mail Order Miller, John Miller, the guy with the weird rifle. It didn't look like the Springfield 1903s the rest of them carried. The wooden stock was worn smooth, darker in some places, like it had been sanded down and re-oiled by hand. The scope mounted on top didn't match. It was smaller, older, with scratches running down the tube like it had been mail-ordered from some bargain catalogue and bolted on in a basement workshop. Even the leather sling looked homemade, cut from an old belt and stitched with uneven thread. Back at base camp, someone had spotted it and laughed. "Jesus, Miller, where'd you get that? Sears and Roebuck?" The nickname stuck. Mail Order Miller. The hick with the bargain bin rifle. But nobody was laughing now. Miller sat with his back against a gnarled tree root, rain dripping off the brim of his helmet in a steady stream. His hands, calloused, steady, were methodically wiping moisture from his scope lens with a strip of cloth he kept tucked inside his jacket. He didn't look panicked like the others. He didn't look up at the trees, scanning wildly for movement. He was listening to the rain hitting different types of leaves, listening to the way the wind moved through the upper canopy versus the lower brush, listening to the silence where there should have been birds. Hayes crawled closer, elbows sinking into the mud. His voice was hoarse, desperate. "Miller, you got any ideas? Because if we don't clear this ridge by nightfall, the Japs are going to come down that slope and cut us off completely. We'll be surrounded." Miller didn't answer right away. He tilted his head slightly, like a dog trying to hear a sound beneath a thunderstorm. His eyes tracked something invisible in the distance. Then he spoke, voice low and flat. "I need everyone to spread out. Behind those root systems 20 feet apart, stay low, don't move." Hayes blinked. "What the hell are you planning?" "I need 30 seconds of complete silence, no breathing loud, no shifting weight, nothing." "And then what?" Miller reached into his pack and pulled out his spare helmet, the dented one he'd been carrying since Guadalcanal. He jammed it onto the end of a thin, flexible branch. He snapped off a sapling. Then he crawled to a moss-covered boulder, settling in behind it with his rifle barrel resting on the wet stone. Hayes stared at him. "You're going to use yourself as bait?" "Not myself, just this." Miller tapped the helmet on the stick. One of the other men hissed from the trench. "That's insane. That's suicide. The second you move that thing, he's going to light you up." Miller's face didn't change. "That's the idea." Lieutenant Hayes wanted to argue. He wanted to pull rank, to order Miller to stand down, to call in an airstrike or artillery or anything other than this This crazy, reckless, stupid plan. But he'd run out of options 3 dead men ago. The CO wouldn't send more men up this ridge. The planes couldn't see through the canopy. The mortars couldn't hit what they couldn't see. All they had left was Miller. And his mail-order rifle. Hayes gritted his teeth and signaled to the others. Slowly, agonizingly, they spread out behind the thick root systems and rocks Miller had pointed to, pressing their bodies into the mud. Then, silence. The rain hissed on the leaves. Somewhere far off, a single bird called, sharp and lonely. Miller shifted his weight, settling his cheek against the stock of his rifle. Then, slowly, carefully, he raised the helmet on the stick just above the edge of the boulder. 1 second, 2 seconds, 3. Crack! The shot came fast and clean. From the left, up high, maybe 60 or 70 yards out. The helmet jerked violently backward. A neat round hole punched through the crown, dead center. But Miller didn't flinch. He didn't fire back. He just watched. His eyes didn't follow the helmet. They tracked something else. Something invisible in the distant trees. His lips moved silently, counting under his breath. 1, 2. He was watching the way the leaves shivered on a branch near the ridgeline. Not from the wind, but from something else. A recoil. A shift of weight. He was watching the way raindrops fell through a gap between 2 coconut palms, and how they didn't fall quite the same on the right side, as if something was blocking them. A body. A rifle barrel. Then Miller did something that made Lieutenant Hayes' stomach drop. He shifted his aim, not toward where the muzzle flash had been, not toward where the shot had come from, but toward a spot 6 feet to the left. A spot where nothing was visible, a spot where, to every other man on that ridge, there was only empty jungle. Miller's finger rested on the trigger, his breathing slowed. He wasn't aiming at where the sniper was, he was aiming at where the sniper would be. Lieutenant Hayes held his breath. The rain pounded. The jungle waited. That was shot number 11 in 4 days. And this time, John Miller knew exactly where the bastard was hiding. John Miller wasn't supposed to be a soldier. He was supposed to be a farmer, or a carpenter, or maybe a mechanic. One of those quiet jobs in a quiet town where nothing ever happened and nobody ever left. He grew up in Hartley, Iowa. Population 847. Main Street was dirt. The houses were wood. The Depression had left everything a little grayer, a little more worn. John's father was a carpenter when there was work, a tenant farmer when there wasn't. His mother worked the register at the general store. They lived close enough to the edge that every winter felt like a gamble. By the time John was 8, he knew how to split firewood and mend fence wire. By 10, he was fixing broken plow blades. By 12, he could tell you which crops would survive a dry summer. It wasn't a hard childhood, just careful, quiet, the kind of life where you learned not to ask for things you didn't need. But John wanted something. Jisam. He found it in the Sears, Roebuck & Co. catalogue. Page 487, tucked between fishing rods and camping gear. Stevens model 416 target rifle, 22 long rifle, includes factory-mounted scope. 1895. John had never held a rifle in his life, but he knew, the way some boys know they're meant to play piano or build engines, that he was meant to shoot. He asked his father once. Robert Miller saw the catalogue and shook his head before John even got the words out. "We don't have money for toys, son." "It's not a toy, it's $18 we don't have." His mother was gentler, but the answer was the same. "Maybe when you're older, honey." But John didn't wait. Okay. He started working, every odd job in Hartley. Hauled scrap metal, 2 cents a pound. Swept floors at the garage, 15 cents an hour. Fixed clocks, sharpened blades, patched tires, saved every nickel in a coffee tin under his bed. 11 months later, he walked into the post office with $19 in cash and filled out the order slip. 3 weeks later, the postmaster called his name. By the time he got home, half the town knew. Miller boy bought himself a gun. Ordered it through the mail. Can you believe that? Probably fall apart first time he pulls the trigger. His father was waiting on the porch, arms crossed. He looked at the box, looked at John, said 4 words. "You paid for it yourself?" "Yes, sir." A long silence. Then Robert Miller nodded once and walked back inside. His mother didn't say anything, but that night, when she kissed John goodnight, her eyes were red at him. The adults laughed. Mr. Kowalski at the hardware store picked up the rifle, turned it over and chuckled. Mail order gun, huh? Bet the barrel's crooked. Tommy Brennan, the best shooter in the county, grinned. That's cute, Miller. My kid brother's got one just like it. John didn't argue. He just went home, cleared the kitchen table, and took the rifle apart, piece by piece. He cleaned each part with kerosene, wiped the barrel until it gleamed, oiled the bolt until it slid like silk. He adjusted the scope mount with a butter knife and pliers, sanded the stock, re-stained it. By the time he was done, the rifle didn't look new. It looked his. And John didn't learn to shoot at a range. He learned in the fields. Every morning before school, he'd walk to where the cornfields ended and the woods began. And he'd practice on crows. Crows were smart, fast, unpredictable. They didn't sit still. If you hesitated, they were gone. John would set up behind a log and wait, sometimes for an hour. He learned to stay still, to breathe slow, to let the world forget he was there. And then, when a crow landed or took off, he'd fire. Most of the time, he missed. But slowly he started to notice things. Wind didn't blow the same at ground level as 20 feet up. A crow taking off into the wind flew slower than one with it. If he aimed directly at a moving target, he'd always miss. The bullet took time to travel. So he stopped aiming at where things were. He started aiming at where they would be. He learned to feel the shot before he took it. A train whistle 2 miles away meant wind from the east. The smell of rain meant humidity rising, bullets dropping faster. The way leaves shimmered told you how air was bending light. And bullets, it wasn't in any manual. It was instinct, built one cold morning at a time. And the rifle, that cheap mail-order rifle, became an extension of his hands. Achee. In the summer of 1938, the Hartley Sportsman's Club held their annual shooting competition. John signed up. The head judge looked at his rifle and didn't hide his amusement. That's what you're shooting with, son? Yes, sir. Tell you what, we'll let you shoot, but you're going last and you're shooting from the back line. He pointed to a bench 20 yards behind the regular firing line. That's where we put the beginners. John felt heat rise in his neck, but he didn't argue. He just walked to the back bench and waited. Mutto. The first event was stationary targets. Shooting from 20 yards farther back, John's groups were decent, but not exceptional. The boys with expensive rifles shot tighter, but then came the second event, moving targets. The wind was strong that day, gusting, unpredictable. Half the shooters missed by feet. But John had spent 2 years in the cornfields, 2 years reading how stalks bent, how leaves turned silver before a gust. He didn't just hit the targets, he anticipated them. He fired at empty air and watched clay pigeons fly into bullets. He shot swinging bottles at the top of their arc, shattering them into dust. The crowd went quiet. John didn't win the competition, but he won the moving target event, shooting from 20 yards farther back than anyone else. One of the older shooters, a Great War veteran named Frank Dalton, walked up afterward. Where'd you learn to shoot like that, son? Cornfields, sir. Crows and wind. Dalton nodded slowly. You don't shoot like a range boy. You shoot like a battlefield boy. John didn't know what that meant. Not yet, but he would. The war came to Hartley on a Sunday, December 7th, 1941. John was in his father's workshop when someone ran past shouting. Then the church bell started ringing, fast, frantic, like an alarm. By the time he reached Main Street, half the town was gathered around the radio. Pearl Harbor. Attacked. Hundreds dead. War. John stood at the back of the crowd, listening. He didn't feel shock. He felt something colder, something like the moment right before you pull the trigger. That space between decision and action, where everything goes very still. That night at dinner, his father spoke. You thinking about signing up? John looked up. His mother's fork stopped halfway to her mouth. Yes, sir. Robert Miller nodded slowly. You take care of that rifle, the one you earned. It's just I know what it is, and I know what it taught you. You take care of it, and you come back. 3 days later, John left for the recruitment office in Mason City. His mother cried. His father shook his hand. The mail-order rifle stayed behind, wrapped in oilcloth. But the scope, he took with him. The induction center was chaos. Hundreds of men, farm kids, factory workers, college boys who'd never held rifles. They stood in lines, got poked and prodded, weighed and measured. John passed everything. Vision, perfect. Hearing, perfect. Reflexes, excellent. Then came the shooting test. They were each handed a Springfield 1903 and told to fire 10 rounds at a paper target 50 yards away. 3 positions: prone, kneeling, standing. No wind, no movement. Just a stationary bullseye and a stopwatch. John fired his 10 rounds. 8 hits in the black, 2 in the outer ring. Decent. Not perfect. The sergeant checked targets and read names for the sniper candidate list. Williams, Patterson Kohler. John's name wasn't called. One of the other recruits, a kid from Davenport named Eddie Russo, nudged him. "Hey, you shot pretty good. How come they didn't pick you?" John shrugged. "Guess I'm not what they're looking for." The sergeant turned to the rest. "Everyone else, standard infantry training. You'll be riflemen. Dismissed." John picked up his duffel. Rifleman, ordinary, unremarkable, just like the rifle, back home. Basic training was 12 weeks of mud, exhaustion, and repetition. They taught him to march, to dig foxholes, to disassemble rifles blindfolded, to bayonet dummies while screaming, and they taught him to shoot the army way. The instructor, Staff Sergeant Kovacs, who'd fought in North Africa, stood in front of the platoon with a chalkboard covered in diagrams. Marksmanship is not guesswork. It is mathematics, ballistics, windage and elevation. You do not feel where the bullet goes. You calculate it. He drew charts: range, wind speed, angle, temperature. Every rifle has a ballistic table. You memorize it. You adjust your sights accordingly. You follow the procedure. You do not deviate. John listened, taking notes. But something felt wrong, not incorrect, just incomplete. The charts didn't account for humidity making air heavier, didn't explain how to read heat shimmer or wind-bending grass 30 yards downrange. They didn't teach you to listen to the field. During live fire, John followed procedures, adjusted sights, used tables, scored well enough to avoid getting yelled at, but he never used what he'd learned in the cornfields. One afternoon, during moving targets, John instinctively led the target, firing where it was going. He hit it, dead center. Kovacs frowned. "Miller, how many clicks did you adjust your lead?" "I didn't, Sergeant. You just what? Guessed?" "I watched the speed and fired where it was going to be." "That's not procedure, Miller. You're supposed to use the reticle markings. You got lucky. Next time, do it right." "Yes, Sergeant." But John knew it wasn't luck, so... At the end of basic, they handed out assignments. John got his orders: 7th Infantry Regiment, Pacific Theater, rifleman. Not sniper, not marksman, just rifleman. Eddie got the same assignment. He grinned. "Looks like we're stuck together, Miller." That night, John sat on his bunk and unwrapped the scope from his mail-order rifle. He ran his thumb over the scratched metal. Checked the lenses. Eddie walked over. "What's that?" "Scope. From my old rifle." "You bringing it?" "Yeah." "Why?" "This one's mine. It taught me how to see." Eddie nodded, not really understanding. John wrapped it back up and tucked it into his duffel. "You shoot like a battlefield boy." Maybe the old man had been right. Maybe the cornfields had been preparing him for something the army couldn't teach. But for now, John Miller was just another rifleman, ordinary, unremarkable, heading to war harm. The first thing John noticed about the Pacific wasn't the heat, it was the wet. Everything was wet. The air, the ground, your rifle, your skin. Within an hour of landing on Bougainville's black sand, John's uniform was soaked. Within 2 hours, it started to rot. The second thing he noticed was the smell. Rot and salt and something sweet and wrong. Later, he'd learn it was bodies left too long in the heat. It was late November 1943. The 7th Infantry was clearing the northern ridge, jungle-covered hills overlooking the main supply route. Intelligence said maybe 100 Japanese soldiers were dug in. Intelligence was wrong. The Japanese weren't just dug in, they were invisible. On the second day, during a patrol, the man in front of John, Private Lawson from Tennessee, stopped for water. Tilted his head back. Crack. Lawson dropped, face down, the back of his head gone. The platoon hit the ground, rifles up, eyes scanning. Nothing, no flash, no movement, no second shot, just silence and rain. Lieutenant Hayes checked the body. Sniper, single shot, high angle, probably in the trees. They waited 20 minutes. Finally, Hayes ordered them to pull back, dragging Lawson's body. They never found the sniper. At Ai Chang, it happened again and again. A rifleman shot crossing a stream, a medic hit while treating wounded, a radio operator killed mid-transmission. Always one shot, always from nowhere, always followed by silence. The men called them ghosts. Japanese snipers weren't like American or German ones. They built hides inside the jungle, in hollow trees, hand-dug pits, platforms lashed 40 feet up in palms. Some tied themselves to branches and stayed for days, motionless. They didn't shoot at groups. They shot at value targets, officers, medics, radio men, anyone whose death hurt more than one man. And they were patient. Fire once a week, then disappear. The psychological effect was worse than casualties. Men stopped talking above whispers, stopped standing upright. Some refused to leave foxholes. Every rustle, every bird call became a threat. One private named Dietrich started flinching at wind, stopped sleeping, stopped eating. After a week, they sent him back, shaking and hollow-eyed, broken without being shot. The fear was personal. You couldn't see the enemy, couldn't hear him, couldn't predict him. You just knew somewhere out there someone was watching through a scope, waiting for you to make a mistake. And when you did, you died. The Army's response was doctrine. Hayes received orders. When under sniper fire, suppressive fire and indirect bombardment are authorized. Do not send men to hunt snipers individually. So they unloaded. 50 men firing into canopy at nothing. M1s cracking, Bayars roaring, mortars shredding jungle. It was loud, violent. It felt like something was being done. But it didn't work. Bullets hit leaves and vines, mortars blew craters in empty ground. When the smoke cleared, the sniper was gone, or still there, untouched, waiting. John watched it happen over and over. Eddie shook his head. We're burning through ammo and haven't killed a single one. It's doctrine. Doctrine's going to get us all killed. John thought about cornfields, about how you couldn't kill a crow by shooting at the tree. You had to predict it, read it. But the Army didn't teach that. Sure. On the 5th day, John finally saw one. The platoon was moving through a cleared trail. It should have been safe. But the birds stopped singing all at once. John had heard that silence in cornfields when a hawk circled. Smaller birds knew. They shut up and hid. Something was watching. John's eyes tracked upward. Leaves on the left were still. But on the right, 40 yards out, palm fronds looked wrong. Too evenly spaced. And beneath them, a shadow that didn't match the trunk. There. John stopped. His hand moved to his rifle. He started calculating. Wind minimal. Distance 50 yards. Elevation 20 feet. Miller, Hayes hissed. What the hell are you doing? Keep moving. Sir, I think there's... I said move. We're exposed. Before John could finish, the man ahead, Carson, stepped into the open. Crack. Carson spun, clutching his shoulder, screaming. The platoon scattered. Suppressive fire, Hayes shouted. Light it up. 30 men opened up. The bar hosed down the jungle. Mortars were called. But John didn't fire. He was watching the palm fronds. In the half-second between volleys, he saw movement, a shape detaching, dropping, disappearing. The sniper was leaving. The barrage continued. By ceasefire, the jungle was shredded and smoking. No body, no blood, no casings. Just empty forest. Oh, okay. That night, John sat staring at his hands. He'd seen the sniper. He'd known where he was. If he'd been allowed one clean shot, right when he spotted the hide, maybe Carson wouldn't be bleeding. But he hadn't been allowed. Because doctrine said suppress. Call mortars. Follow the system. Even when the system didn't work. Eddie crawled over. You okay? I saw him. What? Before Carson got hit. I knew where he was. Why didn't you shoot? Hayes told me to keep moving. By the time we opened up, he was gone. Eddie shook his head. So we had him. And we let him get away. John uncapped his canteen. Yeah. You think you could have killed him? If they'd let you? John thought about crows. About seeing shots before taking them. Yeah. I think I could have. Then why won't they let you try? Because if I miss or get killed trying, it's on Hayes. Safer to burn ammo and hope. Eddie stared. That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. John almost smiled. Yeah, it is. 3 days later, it got worse. The platoon was moving supplies when the lead man went down, shot through the throat. Then the second, then the third. 3 shots, 3 bodies, 5 seconds. Hayes screamed into the radio. We're pinned! Multiple snipers! Need fire support! Mortars came. 6 shells walking up the hillside. Silence. Hayes signaled to move. 10 yards later, another shot. Corporal Vincent, who'd shared cigarettes with John the night before, jerked sideways, clutching his stomach. They pulled him back under fire. By the time they reached cover, he was gone. Eyes open, blood pooling. That night, the men sat in foxholes, wet and exhausted, staring into dark. John kept replaying the shots, the timing, the angles. 3 men, 5 seconds. That wasn't luck. That was planning. The sniper knew where the trail narrowed, where men would bunch, where they'd be vulnerable. He'd predicted them, the same way John predicted crows. Eddie sat across from him. We can't keep doing this, Miller. We can't walk into the same trap every day. I know. So what do we do? John looked at his rifle, then thought about the scope in his pack. I don't know yet, he said quietly. But he was starting to get an idea that had nothing to do with doctrine, an idea that would require breaking rules, and an idea that might be the only thing that could stop the ghosts. The pattern repeated for 2 weeks. Patrol. Get shot at. Suppress. Shell. Retreat. Repeat. It became routine, the kind that ground men hollow. Every morning, Hayes briefed missions, secure this trail, clear that ridge, and everyone knew what would really happen. Move out. Someone gets shot. Fire back at nothing. Call mortars. Pull back. End of day, right where they started, minus 1 or 2 men. The snipers were still out there, still killing, and doctrine wasn't stopping them. John followed orders. When they said dig, he dug. When they said advance, he advanced. When they said suppressive fire, he fired into trees with everyone else. Watching bullets shred leaves and empty air. He hit nothing. None of them did. The snipers knew the American playbook. After the first shot, there'd be wildfire, then mortars, then chaos. So they'd slip away in 30 seconds, reposition before shells landed. By the time the barrage ended, they were gone. Or still there, different spot, waiting. John watched it happen over and over, that tight knot of frustration building. He could read the jungle, see the signs, the way light filtered differently through man-made hides, how birds avoided certain trees, the faint asymmetry of disturbed foliage. But every time he tried to act, doctrine got in the way. On the 10th day during a supply run, John spotted another. They were moving single file near a stream, air still, humid, oppressive. John was third in line. He noticed silence first. No insects, no birds. Then he saw it. Shadow beneath a fallen log, 60 yards uphill, that didn't match the sun angle. There. His pulse quickened. Hand drifted toward rifle. Miller, Hayes hissed. Keep up. Sir, I think... Not now. Stay in formation. The shadow shifted. A head turning, rifle adjusting. Sir, there's a... The shot came. Bowen in front of John gasped and crumpled. Contact left. Suppressive fire! The platoon hammered the hillside. Bullets tore through jungle. Someone called mortars. John didn't fire. He was watching the log. Between volleys, he saw muzzle flash from a different position, 20 yards right. The sniper had moved. While they fired at the old spot, he had crawled to new ground and was lining up another shot. John's rifle came up instinctively. He had the angle, the shot, all he needed. Miller! Hayes grabbed his shoulder. What the hell? Suppressive fire means suppress. Shoot where everyone else is. But he's not there. I don't care. We fire as a unit. Now get online. John gritted his teeth and turned his rifle toward the original position. Squeezed trigger. Sent rounds into dead space. Into nothing. Mortars arrived 30 seconds later, pounding hillside to rubble. Smoke cleared. No body. Just Bowen. bleeding while the medic worked frantically. They stabilized him. Barely. He'd survive but never fight again. One more man down. One more ghost unpunished. That night, Eddie found John at the perimeter edge, staring into dark. "You saw him again, didn't you?" "Yeah." "And they wouldn't let you shoot?" "No." Eddie was quiet. Then, "You know what the guys are saying? That we're cursed. That the jungle's going to kill us all, one by one." John said nothing. "Dietrich went crazy. Lawson's dead, Vincent's dead, Bowen's crippled. And we haven't killed a single sniper." Eddie's voice was bitter. "Not one. We just keep bleeding." "I know. So why won't they let you try?" "I could miss, could get killed, and it'd be Hayes' fault for breaking procedure." "But what if you don't miss?" John looked at him. "Doesn't matter. Not how the army works." Eddie took a drag. "Then the army's going to get us all killed." Shut! The breaking point came 3 days later. The platoon held a trail section while engineers cleared a collapsed bridge. Supposed to be routine. Few hours. It turned into nightmare. Snipers knew they'd be stationary. Predictable. Exposed. First shot at noon dropped a sentry. Second, 20 minutes later, hit a radio operator. Third killed an engineer stepping from cover. Hayes called suppressive fire each time. Each time, they unloaded. Each time, sniper disappeared and returned an hour later from different angle. By nightfall, 5 men lost. 5. They still hadn't seen a single Japanese soldier. The men were breaking, flinching at every sound. Some stared blankly, too exhausted to be afraid. One private named Harris started laughing during the last barrage. Deep, unhinged cackle that didn't stop until the sergeant slapped him. The jungle was winning. Not with bullets, with fear. That night, John pulled out the scope, unwrapped it, checked lenses, mounts, adjustment knobs. Still perfect, still his. Eddie watched. "You thinking about using that?" "Maybe." "Hayes won't let you." "I know." "So what are you going to do?" John stared at the scope, then looked up. "I'm going to wait until Hayes has no choice. When doctrine's failed so completely he's got nothing left, then I'm going to ask again. And if he says no," John's jaw tightened, "then I'm going to do it anyway." Eddie blinked. "You serious?" "Dead serious." "You could get court-martialed." "Maybe, but I'd rather face that than watch another guy bleed out because we're too scared to break rules." Eddie stared, then nodded slowly. "All right, Miller. When the time comes, I got your back." "You don't have to." "I know, but I'm doing it anyway. Somebody's got to keep you from getting shot." John almost smiled. For the first time in 2 weeks, he felt ready. And next morning, new orders came. A ridge to the north. Critical supply route locked down by sniper activity 4 days. 10 men dead. No progress. CO furious. Hayes called John into his foxhole. "Miller, I know you've been noticing things. Seeing things we miss." John said nothing. Hayes sighed. "I'm not supposed to do this. Doctrine says we don't send individual hunters." "But doctrine isn't working. If we don't clear that ridge in 48 hours, they're pulling the whole company back and writing it off." He looked John in the eye. "So here's what I'm thinking. You take a small team, 2, 3 men. You do your thing, whatever it is. If you can clear even one of those bastards, I'll look the other way on how." John's pulse quickened. "You're giving me permission to hunt?" "I'm giving you permission to try, off the record. If you succeed, great. If you fail..." Hayes' expression darkened. "Just don't fail." "I'll need my own scope." Hayes frowned. "The one from your pack?" "Yes, sir." "That thing in even regulation?" "No, sir." Hayes stared, then shook his head. "I don't want to know. Just get it done, Miller." "Yes, sir." Before John left, Hayes called after him. "Miller, one more thing." "Sir?" "That mail-order rifle trick of yours." Voice quiet, almost ashamed. "I'm sorry I didn't listen sooner." John said nothing, just walked back to his foxhole, pulled out the scope, and began to prepare. The time had come. Doctrine had failed. Now John Miller was going to do things his way. Oh no. John spent the night preparing. He took apart his M1 Garand, laid pieces on a poncho, unwrapped the scope, his scope from the mail-order rifle, and examined it by candlelight. Lenses scratched but clear. Mount solid. Adjustment knob still clicked with precision. It wasn't designed for the Garand. Mounting holes didn't line up. But John improvised with canvas strips, wire, friction tape, tested stability, adjusted tension until it felt right. Not pretty, not regulation. But his, Eddie watched. That gonna hold? It'll hold. And this trick's really gonna work? John looked up. You ever hunt crows? Can't say I have. Crows are smart. You can't walk up and shoot them. You have to make them think you're not a threat, or better, make them think they've already won. He tapped the scope. Same principle here. I don't follow. The sniper's winning because he's invisible. Shoots, we panic, he disappears. But what if we let him shoot, give him a target he can't resist? While he's focused on that, we're watching, listening, reading him. Eddie frowned. You mean bait? Smart bait. The kind that gives him exactly what he expects. Until it doesn't. And then? Then I shoot him before he knows I'm there. Eddie was quiet. You're either genius or insane. John smiled faintly. Maybe both. Next morning, Hayes briefed them with a mud-stained map. Here. He pointed to a trail section. 4 days. We've lost men here. At least 3 snipers, maybe more. Overlapping fields of fire. Your job. Clear them. I don't care how. Just need that trail open by tomorrow night. Understood. No fire support. No mortars. No backup. Call for help. You'll give away position. You're on your own. That's fine. Hayes studied him. Good luck, Miller. And they moved out at dawn. 3 men. John, Eddie, Peters. Light gear. No helmet. Too much glare. No radio. Too much noise. John led them off our trail into jungle, moving slowly, stopping every few yards to listen. Not looking for snipers yet. Learning the jungle. Feeling it. How light shifted through canopy. Insect sounds. Smell of rotting vegetation. How moss grew thicker on north tree sides. After an hour, they reached a position overlooking the trail. John found roots and logs providing cover, with clear sightlines. Here, he whispered. They settled in, John behind his rifle, scope to eye, began to watch. 2 hours. Nothing. Jungle still, silent, empty. But John knew better. Stillness didn't mean absence. It meant patience. So he waited too, watched how breeze moved through trees, studied light and shadow patterns, noted where birds landed and where they avoided. Then he saw it. Palm tree, 70 yards downrange. Cluster of fronds didn't move quite right. When wind blew, other trees swayed. But those fronds, just a few, stayed still. Too still. There. John didn't move. Didn't point. Just watched. 10 minutes later, he saw the second sign. Faint shimmer. Not reflection. More like distortion through heat haze. Except it was cool and damp. Breath. Condensing in shade. That's the hide. But John didn't shoot. Not yet. He didn't know if Sniper was alone. Didn't have clear shot. The hide was too concealed. Fire now, he'd probably miss. Sniper would disappear. He needed the sniper to reveal himself. He needed the crazy trick. John turned to Eddie. I need you to do something stupid. Eddie raised eyebrow. How stupid? Put your helmet on a stick. Hold it up, just for a second, like you're peeking. You want me to draw fire? Exactly. Peters hissed. That's insane. He'll shoot the second he sees it. That's the point, John said quietly. When he shoots, I'll know exactly where he is. Muzzle flash, sound, timing. I'll know. What if he doesn't miss? What if he hits one of us? He won't. He'll shoot the helmet. Easy target. Guaranteed. John looked Eddie in the eye. Trust me. Eddie took a breath, nodded. All right, Miller. Let's do this. Decades. Eddie jammed his helmet onto a broken branch, positioned behind thick roots. Ready? John whispered. Ready. On 3. Lift just above the log. Hold 2 seconds. Drop. Got it. John settled behind his rifle, breathing slow. Eyes on palm tree. Finger light on trigger. 1. Heartbeat pounding. 2. Jungle holding breath. 3. Eddie lifted the helmet. 1 second. Nothing. Then, crack. Fast and sharp. Helmet jerked backward. Hole punched clean through. But John didn't flinch. He was watching. In the fraction of a second after the shot, he saw 3 things. First, muzzle flash. Tiny bright flicker from palm fronds. Not where expected. 6 feet lower behind trunk. Second, sound. Sharp and close. Too close for 70 yards. Sniper wasn't 70 away. He was 50. John had misjudged distance, but sound told truth. Third, timing. Gap, just fraction, between flash and sound reaching ears. In that gap, John's mind calculated. Speed of sound, distance, trajectory. He adjusted, not to where flash had been, to where Sniper's head would be when he repositioned for follow-up. Because John knew, from experience, from instinct, from years hunting crows, that Sniper wouldn't stay exact same spot. He'd shift. 6 inches, foot, just enough to change angles, avoid return fire. That shift would take 1 second, and in that second, Sniper would be visible. John aimed at empty air, at spot 6 inches left of flash, at place where nothing was, and waited. 1 heartbeat, 2. Then he saw it. Shadow. Barely there. Flicker of movement as Sniper adjusted position, leaning slightly to reacquire helmet. John squeezed trigger. Crack! Shot echoed through jungle. For a moment, nothing. Then a sound. Heavy, wet thud. Sound of body falling from tree. Eddie stared. Holy shit! Peters whispered, Did you just... John didn't answer. Already scanning tree line, checking for second Sniper. Nothing. After 30 seconds, birds started singing again. Eddie crawled forward, wide-eyed. Miller, how the hell? John lowered rifle, hands shaking slightly. I didn't shoot where he was. I shot where he'd be. But you couldn't even see him. Didn't need to. Just needed to read him. John tapped temple. Sound. Timing. How light moved. That's all you need. Peters shook his head. That's not in any manual. I know. That's why it works. Over the next 3 days, John's team moved through jungle like ghosts themselves. They didn't announce presence, didn't fire blindly, didn't call support, they just hunted. Sniper number 2 hid in pit beneath fallen log. John spotted him watching how rainwater pooled differently, like something underneath displaced flow. Used decoy pack dragged by rope. Sniper fired. John counted seconds between flash and sound, adjusted for windage, fired into dark slit beneath log. Sniper number 3 was cautious. Didn't take bait first time. Or second. But John noticed. Every decoy setup. Insects in one particular jungle section went quiet. Not everywhere, just one spot. That's where Sniper watched from. John aimed at quiet zone center, waited. When Sniper finally fired at dummy, John fired half-second later. Sniper number 4 and number 5 worked as pair. John realized when shots came too fast, too accurate. 1 spotter, 1 shooter. He set up 2 decoys, 1 obvious, 1 subtle. Sniper shot, obvious. But John ignored that, watching for spotter. Less concealed because not pulling trigger. Found him in tree crook with binoculars. First shot killed spotter, shooter, panicked without partner, fired wildly. Eddie tracked sound, put rounds into hide, 5 down in 3 days. When they returned to company perimeter, men stared like they'd walked back from dead. Hayes met them. Miller, report. 5 confirmed kills, sir. Trail's clear. Hayes blinked. 5? In 3 days? Yes, sir. How? John pulled scope off rifle, held it up. This. And patience. Hayes stared at scratched, jury-rigged scope. That's not even regulation. No, sir. And it works. Yes, sir. Hayes was quiet, then nodded slowly. I don't care if you're using a slingshot, Miller. If it kills snipers, keep using it. That night, men gathered around John with questions. How'd you see them? How'd you know where to shoot? John tried explaining sound, timing, feeling jungle, not just looking, but most didn't understand, nodded with blank eyes, like explaining color to someone who'd only seen gray. Only Eddie got it. It's like hunting, isn't it? Not target practice. Actual hunting. Yeah, exactly, Eddie grinned. Looks like that mail-order rifle taught you something the army couldn't. John almost smiled, but then looked at his hands, still steady, still calloused, and thought about 5 men killed in 3 days. Young men, soldiers like him, just other side, and wondered if the trick he'd learned in cornfields was gift or curse. Word spread fast. By next morning, every man knew about Miller and his mail-order rifle. Guy who'd cleared 5 snipers in 3 days. Guy who shot ghosts. Hayes pulled him aside. Miller, battalion's got a problem. Supply route 2 miles north. Locked down for a week. At least 10 snipers. 17 men dead in 6 days. Whole northern offensive stalled. He pulled out map. I'm giving you 4 days. 3 men. Your pick. Clear that ridge or we lose the entire operation. John studied brutal terrain, steep slopes, dense jungle, perfect sniper country. What support? None. You go quiet. No mortars, no radio, no backup. Once in jungle, you're alone. Understood. Some of these snipers, they're good, Miller, really good. Don't underestimate them. I won't, sir. Giants. John picked Eddie and Peters. They moved out at dawn. First 2 miles, quiet. Too quiet. John kept eyes moving, scanning canopy, underbrush, trail ahead. Reached ridge by mid-morning, supply trail cut through narrow valley flanked by steep hillsides. Perfect kill zone. John found vantage point and settled to watch. Within an hour, spotted 3 hides. Day 1. Clearing the gates. Sniper number 1 was high in coconut palm, 80 yards out. John saw platform first. Crude bamboo frame in fronds, then barrel. He waited, watched wind through trees, noted sun angle. Eddie set up helmet on stick, moved slowly across gap below. Sniper fired. John counted. 1, 2. Tracked sound. Flash. Heat shimmer rising from muzzle. Fired into space where sniper would lean to check shot. Body fell, tumbling through branches, hitting ground with wet crunch. Sniper number 2 dug into hillside behind camouflaged blind. John spotted by, watching rain fall. Section of ground where water pooled differently, running off sides like solid roof underneath. He waited. 3 hours. Until sniper shifted, easing cramp. Enough. John saw movement behind fronds. Fired. Found body later slumped in shallow pit. Sniper number 3 was smart. Saw what happened to others. Wouldn't take bait. John tried decoys, noise, waiting. Nothing. Sniper stayed hidden. Silent, patient. John spent rest of day studying jungle. Not looking for sniper, but for absence of normal. Places birds didn't land, insects didn't buzz. Light filtered differently. By late afternoon, found it. Section of underbrush near fallen log where nothing moved. Dead spot. Watched another hour. Saw faint puff of condensation. Breath from shadow beneath log. Aimed. Waited for next breath. Fired. Shadow jerked. Went still. 3 down. By nightfall, secured small perimeter in rocks. 8 cold rations. Tried sleeping in shifts. Sleep didn't come easy. Jungle alive with sound. Every noise could be sniper. Every shadow could be death. Eddie crawled over. 3 in 1 day. That's good, right? It's progress. You think we can keep this up? John thought about remaining snipers. First 3 had been relatively easy, but ones left would be different. Best. Smartest. Ones who'd survived because they didn't make mistakes. Tomorrow's going to be harder? Eddie nodded. Yeah, I figured. Day 2, the patient ones. Next day, prediction came true. Remaining snipers weren't taking bait. John tried every trick. Decoys, noise, movement, waiting, nothing. Hours passed. Sun climbed, heat oppressive, sweat soaked through uniform, attracting flies, mosquitoes. Eyes burned from staring through scope, muscles cramped from lying motionless. But he didn't move, because snipers were doing same, waiting, testing his patience. Battle of wills. Sniper number 4 revealed himself at 1400 hours. Not by firing, by sound. Faint click of rifle bolt drawn back. Slow, careful, not silent. John's head turned fractionally, scanning direction. There, 60 yards. Behind vine tangle hanging from dead tree. Couldn't see sniper, but knew he was there. Waited. 10 minutes, 20, 30, then saw it. Tiny shift in vines, not from wind, from something behind them. Fired. Vines jerked. Gasp, barely audible, then body slumping. Sniper number 5 was even harder. Didn't make sound, didn't shift. Didn't breathe loud. But John found him by watching birds. Section of ridge where birds kept landing, then taking off seconds later. Over and over, something disturbing them. Not scaring completely, just uncomfortable enough to relocate. John studied area. After hour, noticed branch that should have swayed with others. Wasn't. Weighted down. By someone. Aimed at branch base. Weighted. Eventually sniper had to adjust, shift weight to stay balanced. John fired moment branch dipped. Body fell, crashing through canopy, hitting ground 40 feet below. Sniper number 6 nearly killed them. John didn't see him, didn't hear, didn't sense. First warning. Peters gasping, "Contact rear!" John spun. Muzzle flash 50 feet away behind them. Shot went wide, clipping tree inches from Eddie's head. Sniper had been following them. John didn't think, just reacted. Swung rifle, fired blind. Not at where flash was, but where sniper would dodge after firing. Left, standard evasion, bullet hit. Grunt, stumble. Peters put 2 rounds into underbrush. Silence. 6 down. But John's hands shaking. Too close. Yes. End of day 2. 6 snipers killed, but cost mounting. John's body breaking. Eyes bloodshot, strained. Hands trembled when not holding rifle. Low-grade fever. Enough to make head pound, skin clammy. Eddie twisted ankle. Peters had infected cut. None slept more than few hours in 2 days. But couldn't stop. Not yet. Day 3. The breaking point. Day 3 was nightmare. Remaining snipers were elite. Sniper No. 7 was ghost. 6 hours trying to find him. Every trick, every method, nothing. Finally, desperate, John did something reckless. He stood up, full view. Eddie hissed, "Miller, what?" But John watched jungle. Daring sniper to take shot, because snipers couldn't resist easy target. Human nature. See, man standing open. Every instinct screams, shoot. Shot came. Fast. Clean. Missed John by inches. He'd already started moving moment he heard faint scrape of barrel against wood, but that sound told everything. Direction, distance, position. He dropped, rolled, brought rifle up, fired in one motion. Silence. Then thud. 7 down. But hands shaking worse, heart pounding. That had been stupid, reckless. Almost died. Eddie crawled over, pale. "Don't ever do that again." "I won't. Promise." "I promise." Sniper number 8 killed by patience. John found hide, hole in banyan tree base, and waited outside. 12 hours. Without moving, eating, drinking. Knew sniper was inside. Had to come out eventually. Eat, piss. Breathe fresh air. When he did, shadow emerging at dusk, John shot him. Sniper No. 9 hidden in roots and mud, perfectly camouflaged. John walked within 10 feet. Didn't see. Only reason alive. Peters noticed mud shaped wrong. Too smooth. Peters fired first. John second. Sniper died without getting shot off. 9 down. But John could barely stand, legs shaking, vision blurring, father spiking. Eddie grabbed arm. "Miller, you need rest. Water. I'm fine." "You're not fine. You look like death." "We're almost done." "You're gonna collapse." "I'll collapse when it's over." Eddie stared, then nodded. "When this is done, I'm carrying your stubborn ass back myself. Oh. Day 4, the final 2. By morning day 4, John, running on fumes, hadn't slept, hadn't eaten, could barely keep water down. But 2 snipers remained. Just 2. And he could feel them out there. Sniper No. 10 and number 11 were working together. John realized when shots came too coordinated, one from left, seconds later, another from right. They were communicating, spotter and shooter, or 2 shooters in tandem, couldn't beat them with single decoy, needed something smarter. He set up double decoy. Helmet on stick at clearing edge. Obvious. Easy. Second, poncho stuffed with leaves, dragged by rope, 20 yards left. Then waited. First shot from right. Hitting helmet, second from left, hitting poncho. 2 shooters, 2 positions. John had been counting. 1, 2, timing between shots, 3 seconds. Coordinating, waiting for each other, which meant both had to reposition to confirm kills. John aimed right position. At empty space where sniper would lean to check helmet, Eddie aimed left, at space where second would emerge. Waited, 1 second, 2, 3. Both snipers moved. John and Eddie fired simultaneously. 2 shots, 2 thuds, silence. For a long moment, no one moved. Then birds started singing. Eddie lowered rifle, breathing hard. Is that all of them? John closed eyes, listened. Jungle sounded different, lighter, safer. Yeah, he whispered. That's all of them. Tried to stand, legs gave out. Slumped against tree, rifle sliding from hands. Eddie caught him. Whoa, easy. You're done. We're going back. The bodies will confirm later. Right now, you need medic. World spinning. Vision going dark. Last thing John heard was Eddie's voice. You did it, Miller. You killed the ghosts. John woke in field hospital 2 days later. Head pounded. Body ached like he'd been beaten. Fever broken but left him weak, hollow. Medic came over with water. Easy, soldier. You've been out 48 hours. Dehydration, exhaustion, fever. Lucky to be alive. John drank. Water tasted like metal. My team? Fine. Russo's on watch outside. Says he's not leaving till you wake. John nodded, winced. Even that hurt. Your CO wants to see you when you're up. 3 hours later, John sat across from Hayes, his ears ringing, high-pitched whine that hadn't stopped. Medic said, might be permanent. Too many rifle shots too close without ear protection. Hayes looked tired, older. You cleared the ridge, Miller. All 11 confirmed. Supply routes open. Divisions moving forward. Good. Good? It's a miracle. Command wants to know how you did it. John shrugged. Watch. Listen. Predict. They want you to teach it. Write it down. Turn it into doctrine. John almost laughed. You can't teach this, sir. It's not something you learn from manual. Then explain it. Intelligence officer coming next week to debrief. They want to add your methods to field training. John stared at hands, still shaking slightly. Tremor he couldn't control. I'll do what I can, sir. Hayes studied him. You look like hell, Miller. I feel like hell. Medic says you need 2 weeks rest. Minimum. I'm pulling you offline. Sir, that's an order. You've done enough, more than enough. You saved lives, Miller, but you can't keep doing this. You'll burn out, or worse. John knew he was right, could feel it. Exhaustion wasn't just physical, deeper, like something inside ground down to nothing. Yes, sir. Debrief came week later. Intelligence captain sat with notebook and questions. How did you identify hides? How did you predict positions? What's the key to countering Japanese snipers? John answered best he could. Sound and timing, reading jungle, birds, insects, how light filtered through foliage. Leading target, shooting where they would be, not where they were. Captain scribbled furiously. This is good, actionable. We can build training scenarios. You can't teach it, John interrupted. Captain looked up. Excuse me? You can't teach someone to feel wind, to hear difference between branch breaking naturally and rifle bolt clicking. That takes years, takes growing up where you have to learn it. Captain frowned. So your methods are useless to anyone who didn't grow up on farm? They're not system, they're instinct. You can teach principles, watch, wait, predict. But application? That's personal. Every jungle's different. Every sniper's different. You have to adapt. Captain closed notebook slowly. That's less useful than I'd hoped. But later, pieces of John's debrief made it into field manuals. Not as doctrine, but guidelines. Notes in margins. When engaging snipers in dense jungle, consider environmental indicators. Bird behavior, insect activity, light distortion. Patience and observation may yield better results than suppressive fire. Not much, but something. And it saved lives. Men in company looked at John differently, some with awe. The ghost hunter, mail order Miller, some with suspicion. How does farm kid with jury-rigged scope outshoot trained Japanese snipers? Some muttered about luck, exaggeration, stolen credit. John didn't care, wasn't doing this for glory. Doing it because men were dying and he had skill that could stop it, but attention wore on him. 2 weeks later, Hayes called him in. Division wants dedicated counter-sniper unit, small teams, specialized training. They want you to lead one. John shook head. I'm not leader, sir. I'm just rifleman. I know. You keep saying that, but you're best we've got. If you don't do it, more men die. It's that simple. John looked at hands, tremor still there, ringing in ears hadn't stopped. At night, dreamed of palm trees and shadows and bodies falling. I'll do it, but only till job's done. After that, I'm just rifleman again. Deal, Dirk. For next 3 months, John led hunter teams through worst sniper-infested terrain on Bougainville. Taught Eddie, Peters, handful of others basics. Watch, wait, predict. Some got it, most didn't, but they killed snipers. Dozens. Supply routes stayed open. Offensive moved forward, and slowly, Japanese sniper threat diminished. Not because of doctrine, not because of overwhelming firepower, but because one farm kid with mail-order scope figured out how to turn their tactics against them. April 1944, John was rotated offline. Hearing permanently damaged. Hands shook when not holding rifle. Nightmares every night. Visions of men in trees, shadows in jungle. Wet thud of bodies. Medics called it combat fatigue. Today, PTSD. But back then, you just kept moving. Until war ended or you did. John was sent back to States for medical evaluation. Doctors said he'd done enough, offered discharge, ticket home, he took it. Last day in Pacific, Eddie found him packing. So you're really leaving? Yeah. Can't blame you. You look like you've aged 10 years in 6 months. John almost smiled. Feel like it too. Eddie held out hand. Thanks, Miller. For everything. You saved a lot of lives, including mine. John shook it. You saved mine a few times too. Yeah. That's what we do, right? Right. Eddie watched him sling duffel. You taking the rifle? John patted wrapped bundle on pack. Yeah. Can't leave it behind. It's part of me now. Good. Take care of it, and yourself. You too, Eddie. They didn't say goodbye, just nodded, the way soldiers do when they know they'll probably never see each other again. Ciao. John boarded transport next morning. As island disappeared behind him, swallowed by horizon, he felt something loosen in chest. Relief, grief, exhaustion. He'd survived, but left pieces of himself in that jungle. Pieces he'd never get back. Mail-order rifle lay wrapped in canvas at pack bottom. Scratched, worn, stained with mud and blood and years. It taught him to see, to predict, to survive, but also taught him cost of being good at killing, and that was lesson John Miller would carry for rest of his life. John Miller came home to Hartley, Iowa in summer 1944. Town threw small parade. High school band played. Mayor shook his hand. People clapped his back, called him hero. He smiled, said thank you, shook hands till arm hurt, but didn't feel like hero, felt tired. Chawai moved back into parents' house. Father had aged, more grey, more lines. Mother cried when she saw him, held tight, didn't ask about war, didn't need to, could see it in his face. Mail-order rifle went back into closet, wrapped in oilcloth, hidden in dark. John didn't touch it for months. He tried going back to normal, worked in father's carpentry shop, fixed furniture, built cabinets, kept hands busy, but tremor never went away. Ringing in ears never stopped. At night, when house was quiet, he'd dream of jungles and shadows and bodies falling through trees. People would ask sometimes, at diner, at church, What was it like over there? Did you really kill all those snipers? How'd you do it with that old rifle? John gave short answers. Polite. Vague. It was hard. I did my job. Just got lucky, I guess. He never told truth. That luck had nothing to do with it. That it was years of patient practice, learning to read wind and predict movement, turning cheap rifle into extension of himself. That the thing everyone laughed at, mail order rifle, bargain scope, farm boy's obsession, kept him alive and saved dozens of others. Okay. Years later, historian researching Pacific tactics came to Hartley. Someone told him about John Miller, ghost hunter, man who cleared 11 snipers in 4 days. Historian sat across from John in carpentry shop. Why do you think your methods worked when standard doctrine failed? John thought, long moment. Because I didn't try to overpower them. I tried to understand them. Japanese snipers were patient, invisible, deadly, so I had to be more patient, more invisible, see what they couldn't, predict what they couldn't. And the rifle? John smiled faintly. Wasn't about rifle, was about knowing it so well it became part of me. People thought it was cheap, inadequate, but I understood every scratch, every quirk, every click. That intimacy made all difference. So it wasn't superior equipment, it was superior knowledge. Yeah, I guess so, Chanel. Story might have ended there, forgotten footnote in Forgotten War, but didn't, because John's methods found their way into training manuals, into briefings, into minds of other soldiers facing similar threats. Mail-order rifle became symbol, not of wealth or power or military might, but of something else, of idea that sometimes most dangerous weapon isn't most expensive, it's one in hands of someone who truly understands it, that sometimes doctrine fails, manuals fall short, system doesn't have answer, and in those moments, it's ordinary man, overlooked, laughed at, dismissed, who steps up and changes everything. John Miller died in 1984, age 62. Mail-order rifle was buried with him, his final request. Obituary in Hartley Gazette was 3 paragraphs, mentioned carpentry work. Family, service in World War II, didn't mention 11 snipers. 4 days in hell. Crazy trick that turned farm boy into legend. But men he served with remembered, and in veterans' halls and military museums and late-night conversations between old soldiers, story lived on. Story of mail-order Miller. Ordinary man with cheap rifle who killed ghosts. Man who proved sometimes most powerful weapon isn't one you buy, it's one you earn. Okay. If you believe stories like John Miller's, stories of ordinary people doing extraordinary things, deserve to be remembered, keep listening, keep learning, keep honoring those who fought not for glory, but because someone had to. Because in the end, wars aren't won by biggest guns or best technology. They're won by people, ordinary people, who refuse to give up, even when everyone else has stopped believing.